Welcome back to the activation phase. Today we're looking at the Age of Chivalry Mercenary tier list. So this is a general overview over the mercenaries in the Age of Chivalry book, and since every faction can bring every mercenary, this is a rating of the mercenaries overall and not for how good each mercenary is with each faction. We're starting off with tier 3, that's the overshadowed mercs. And first up are the brigands. 8 warriors on foot, and they do not get slowed by terrain or fatigue. So they always move medium, and even if your opponent wants to slow you down to short, that doesn't work, and they can move medium and charge medium through terrain, no problem. They count as unarmed when they fight enemy units with armor 5 at the beginning of the combat, so that's supposed to represent them having small little knives and daggers that don't work super well against armor 5 guys, but as soon as you take their fatigue, they lose the unarmed rule, and they also gain 2 attack dice and 2 defense dice. So these guys don't have a lot going on. Them not being slowed down by terrain or fatigue is okay, and it's nice, but there's no free activation here. It's just 8 warriors on foot. Yes, they can close ranks, but they're kind of like a win more mercenary if your opponent has fatigue, which is super good, and you should try to get fatigue on them anyway. They get really good, or good, I guess, and but your army would win that fight anyway. Any unit can go and fight a unit that is fatigued and win that fight. So the brigands don't really bring any value to that, unless you're going to spread so much fatigue that your units, every unit can fight a fatigued unit, and then the brigands might be worth it. Next up are the robots. They're very different. There's 16 levies with improvised projectiles, and they're unarmed. They have aggression a third and then half, and they have armor 3/3, and friendly units do not suffer a fatigue due to them being eliminated. So they're very interesting. Since they're 16 levies and they're a mercenary, they're worth a ton of victory points for the 1 point you pay for them, which of course can matter in some games. They're obviously kind of tanky, but since they're unarmed and have improvised projectiles, they can't close ranks, and their tankiness only comes from the amount of bodies that you're putting on the table. When these guys activate to shoot, it's going to be 8 shots with improvised projectiles though, and when they fight, that's going to be 6 attack dice, which isn't too shabby. But overall, these guys don't really have a place. If you want to use them as a tanky unit, there's better tanky units. If you want to have them as a shooting threat, then there's just better shooting threats here in the mercenaries, and they are worth a lot in victory points, and they're kind of easy to take out because they don't really fight back well, and so taking them out isn't too hard. So these guys, yes, a lot of bodies, but not a lot of value. So also here in T3. Next up are the Genoese crossbowmen. They're 8 warriors with crossbows and pavises that can't close ranks. They have a pre-game move of medium or short if you move them into terrain. So before the first turn, so it doesn't count for activation for the first turn, for fatigue and activations for the first turn. These guys can move once, so that's medium or short, even though they have pavises, and so usually can only move short. But yeah, the pre-game move, they can move short and kind of try to get into position. They can use the shooting combat bonus even when the board does not have it, so only the English board has the shooting combat bonus, and so these guys can use it for any faction. And they gain 1 extra attack die when using the combat pool or combat bonus. So they don't have a lot going on. It's nice to get into position early, but they can't close ranks, and so they're not incredibly tanky. Their armor isn't the greatest, so overall they don't really have a place. They have armor 3/3. Yes, they can move up, but they can get into a bit of terrain maybe, but they don't shoot a lot of shots, and investing dice into the combat bonus always feels wrong. Yes, you get basically every common and uncommon turns into a rare because you get two of those dice, or 2 attack dice for the first time you use the combat bonus, but they have no great abilities themselves, and having to invest more and more into mercenaries is usually a sign that they're not worth it. So they're also here in tier 3. Next up are the handgunners, and this might be controversial, but these guys just have a lot of problems that just aren't easily solvable, and so they're here in the overshadowed mercs. They're just 8 warriors with handguns, so these are special weapons. Handguns give -1 to defense dice when being shot, and the first casualty inflicted by these handguns becomes a fatigue instead of a casualty, so you do less damage, but you get a fatigue. And they have the skirmisher rule, so they can move for free after shooting, but that still generates fatigue. So these guys are armor 3/3 again, and they can't use the combat bonus because most factions don't have it. Yeah, of course they can use it with the English, and that's nice, but getting that 1 fatigue is super important, because if they don't get it, you basically achieve nothing, and they're super weak in the front lines. Armor 3/3, not being able to close ranks, not being able to use any battleboard abilities. These guys will explode by sneezing at them, and so that's very dangerous to have a unit like that in your front lines, where they kind of need to be, because yes, they have a shooting range of large, but anywhere they can hide, your opponent probably can get them if they want to shoot. And so not a big fan of these. The idea is really cool, but they need some kind of offensive or defensive buff that makes either the fatigue more reliable or them less easily killed, so to make them worth it. Next up are the arrière-ban. There are 12 levies that can be mounted, so that's very interesting for Merc. And these guys might be in the tier 2, but they're the best unit in tier 3 here. And they have a special rule, so they roll a d6 at the beginning of the orders phase. That's very important, because beginning of the orders phase makes things a lot more predictable, because you know what these guys can do. And then if they roll one of the less interesting results, you can just plan your orders phase without them, and yeah, then they're just kind of a die generator, a Saga dice generator, I guess. So they roll a d6 at the beginning of the orders phase, and on a 1, they just run away towards your edge, so that's unfortunate. On a 2, that's the worst result by far. And then in most situations, I guess, if they have an objective marker and you wanted to get back to your zone, then this isn't too bad. On a 2, they shed all the fatigues they have, but they can't activate this turn, so that's kind of okay, but still a bit challenging. If you need these guys to do something and then they don't, that's unfortunate. On 3, they gain determination, so it's nice. They generate a die and then they have determination, so you don't have to invest a die into them. On 4, they gain resilience 2, so that makes them super tough. 12 levies with resilience, basically untouchable. You can't try to wipe them out, but you won't do anything. And with them having resilience is also nice, with them possibly rolling a 2 in the later game to shed all their fatigue. So I guess if you roll a 4 and then a 2, that's kind of the best thing you can do. And then 5 and 6 are the good ones. So on 5, they gain aggression 1, so that's 12 levies. They're going to throw 12 attack dice, and they can charge for free. And as I said, free activations for units that generate dice are super good. And so that's kind of what you want. And then 6 is the best thing that can happen most of the times, I should say, the most aggressive things. And they have all the things from 5, so aggression 1 and a free charge, but they also gain a +1 to attack dice when fighting heroes or Hearthguard. And that's of course super good. +1 to attack dice fighting heroes or Hearthguard is backbreaking, because these guys have high armor, so the +1 matters a lot. And them getting this on a 6 is super good. But they're still here in tier 3 because you can't really plan with them, because you don't know what they're going to do. There's going to be some games where it's just going to be 12 levies that never gain the aggression one, and then they just don't provide that much value. They might be interesting for factions that are only mounted and want to put some foot guys down, or only on foot and want to put some mounted guys down, because then they can maybe be a counterbalance. But in general, them being so random makes them less interesting for, I think, very planned and high tier play, and so they're here in tier 3. Next up are the good mercs, so that's tier 2. And we have the pikemen. That's 8 warriors on foot with pikes. They don't suffer the movement penalty that comes with pikes, so they don't move short, they move medium, which is good. They get 2 attack dice and 2 defense dice on the charge. So when these guys charge themselves, it's basically like they're playing a Saga ability every time they charge. And then they get 2 defense dice and suffer 1 less fatigue at the end of combat when closing ranks. So when they're a defender and they close ranks, they don't suffer fatigue, or 1 less, I should say, at the end of combat. So the defender part is super good. 2 defense dice when having closed ranks is incredible. We know that from the Greeks in Age of Hannibal, and suffering 1 less fatigue is also super good, because then these guys can stay flexible. But other than that, they're just 8 warriors, just an 8 stack of warriors on foot with pikes. So they're here in tier 2. They have good abilities, but they probably don't want to be in every army. Next up are the English archers. They're 8 warriors with bows. They can shoot large plus medium, so that's a long ways out. That's straight up 18 inches. And they can use the shooting combat bonus even when the board does not have it, so like the crossbowmen from before. And they activate for an additional shoot at a different target after their first shoot activation, and they still get fatigue for that. So yes, you can activate them for a die and then they shoot twice, but the second one will inflict a fatigue. They count terrain as 1 category of cover better than it is, so if they're just on in woods or a forest, then they're going to count as that as solid cover when they're attacked, and when they're on a steep hill, they're going to count that as light cover when they're shot. They have okay value. That's 8 attack dice for every activation, so that's not bad. The problem is you always have to kind of spread it out, but these guys are definitely super safe to play with. Keeping them away, large plus medium, is very far away for many armies. Yes, some cavalry armies can definitely get there, but then you just use terrain, and these guys are safe, because the terrain is hard to mess up for your opponent, because large plus medium is just very far. Them having to shoot at different targets hurts a bit, because you always kind of want to focus down one. It's just like the English army, and so I think they're good, but they're not incredible. Next up is the city militia. They're 12 levies equipped with crossbows and pavises, and they can close ranks and have armor 4/4. They have aggression 3rd, and they can shoot for free after moving once per turn. So these guys are incredibly tanky, because it's 12 bodies with armor 4/4 that can close ranks and have pavises, so they're protected in melee and they're protected from shooting without terrain. So these guys are super tough, but they don't do a whole lot of damage. So that's they're just a tank unit. You want to have them move around with you. They're going to move short, of course, because of the pavises, but they're probably one of the most tanky units in the whole game for their price. And so them moving short is justified, and 12 levies with armor 4/4. Shooting levies always feels like you're losing the game anyway, and then if they have pavises, that's gonna feel real bad. And charging them when they can just close ranks and make that charge be kind of irrelevant, because you don't really care if you lose like 3 levies. And so they're tough, but they don't do a lot in the offensive side of the game, and so they're here in the good mercs. But they're definitely usable by many factions that just kind of want a tank walking around. Next up are the bidets. The 8 warriors on foot with javelins. They move medium plus very short in open terrain and medium in difficult terrain. They can change the effect terrain has on your and your opponent's army, or your army and your opponent's army, if the terrain is entirely within large at the beginning of your orders phase. So that's a really steep ask. They want the piece of terrain entirely within large. So if your opponent uses a large piece of terrain, a big forest or an open hill, or not an open hill, I guess, but a steep hill, then you have to get them really close, and sometimes the terrain might even be too big, where they have to be within the terrain to activate their ability, which isn't too hard to do, of course, because they can move quickly into terrain, but still a bit challenging. So they can change for your army, they can change the effect from dangerous to difficult. So a swamp becomes difficult terrain instead of dangerous terrain, so no fatigue. And they can change difficult terrain to open ground. So they can make cavalry be able to charge into ruins or into a forest, no problem, because the cavalry will count it as open ground. And they technically can make a cannon be able to walk onto a steep hill, for example, which might be interesting in some games, where the cannon just can't get line of sight, and then the bidets make it count as open, and so the cannon can walk onto the steep hill and then shoot again. And for your opponent's army, they can make solid cover count as light cover, so that's really, really, really good when you want to charge them. Losing solid cover is brutal, and so that works. And the other thing they can do is make light cover into no cover, so if you want to just shoot them, taking away their cover can definitely be very good. Their biggest problem is them having to be entirely within large of the terrain piece, or the terrain piece having to be entirely within large of the bidets, because that's hard to do, and they don't have anything going on for their own defensibility. So they're just 8 warriors on foot with javelins. They can't close ranks. They will just be eaten up in melee and in shooting. They're not super tough either. It's not bad, but that's just one thing to keep in mind. That's why they're here in the good tiers, or good mercs, tier 2, and not the very good ones. But let's get into those. The first one here are the Savage Scots and Gallow Glasses. They're 8 warriors on foot with heavy weapons, so that's the only time a unit has heavy weapons in the whole of Age of Chivalry, and they get bonus attack dice equal to half the models in the unit. So if that's in the beginning, it's going to be 8 warriors, so they're going to throw 12 attack dice, so the 8 warriors generate 8 plus 4 for the ability, so 12 attack dice when attacking with the Savage Scots and Gallow Glasses. And they can move at the end of enemy activation phase if more than medium away from all enemy units. So that's one of the very few completely free activations in the mercenaries have here, and them always for free being able to stay in the fight and getting to where they need to be, possibly not having to take a fatigue because they need to double activate, and then being very brutal in melee because they're just heavy weapons with 12 attack dice, hurt a lot. Anything they touch will definitely be hurt, other than city militia, I guess. And so yeah, they're good, they're super aggressive, and when they get charged they still have heavy weapons, and so they're gonna take a chunk out of your opponent's army either way, and that's definitely very good. Next up is the Knight. So that's a single hero that can either be on foot, and then he's going to have armor 5/6, or mounted, and that's going to be armor 5/4. And 5/6, of course, is incredible. Having armor 6 in shooting hurts the chances to shoot so much. Yes, there's crossbows running around, lots of them, of course, and so that kind of negates that. But having armor 6 is tough. So if you put this guy on foot, he's going to be super tough. And then mounted, he's super mobile, of course. He has aggression 6 and gets +1 to attack dice when attacking other heroes. So he can kind of try to kill the warlord, and then he's kind of as efficient as a normal 8 die point would be, or 1 point unit would be. He needs to take a vow, and that's one of 3. He can either be a crusader, and he's going to increase his resilience. When he's out of your own deployment zone, he's going to have resilience 2, and when he's in your opponent's deployment zone, he's going to have resilience 3 and gets +1 to his aggression, so that's going to be aggression 7. So that's resilience 3 is incredibly tough, and him being mounted, you can easily get that within the first 2 turns. So resilience 3, of course, incredible. No one wants to actually melee fight resilience 3. You always want to shoot these down with multiple small shots, and so he's going to take a lot of fire to take out and just eat up lots of your opponent's activations. And the next one is no fatigue at the end of combat, so there's never retreat, and he just suffers 1 less fatigue when he's the attacker, and he gets 3 bonus defense dice when he's the attacker. So when he charges in, 3 bonus defense dice, nice, and no fatigue at the end of combat is also nice. So keeping him fresh a bit longer is pretty good. And then there's Protect the Weak, maybe the most interesting one, just because it's very different. It's just not like a clear buff, but it's he can fight for friendly units that he's close to and where he can see the enemy unit. So if he's standing next to a unit of levies and the levies get charged and he has line of sight to the attacking unit and is within very short of the friendly unit, then he just swaps places fight-wise with the levies. So he's going to take the attack dice and he's going to have to roll the defense dice. So that's very interesting. Next up, we have the foreign men-at-arms. There's 6 warriors, either on foot, so they're going to have 5/6, just like the knight, or mounted, and then they're going to have 5/4. So for warriors, that's a very tough stat line, and they get more bonuses. They get 2 bonus attack dice and 2 bonus defense dice when they're on foot, when they take part in a melee, and they have aggression 2 on the charge when they're mounted. So when they're mounted, they have armor 5, and it's 6 warriors that throw 12 attack dice. That's brutal, because just 12 attack dice for a single point is always great value, just like the Savage Scots and Gallo Glasses. And when they're on foot, they're incredibly tough and tanky. 2 bonus attack dice and 2 bonus defense dice makes sure that they will stay alive for a while, and having armor 6, just a single die on the combat bonus to kind of combat the shooting that they might receive is super good. They're not a very complicated unit. It's just 6 warriors, and this is not a typo, as the book says. They're worth it that way anyway. And their flexibility, when you write down your roster and you just say I have 4 men-at-arms, and you can then still, when the game starts, decide if you want to put them on foot or mounted, makes them very good. Next up, we have a very interesting tanky unit. It's the Lombard Lancers. They're 8 warriors mounted on barded horses, and they have armor 5/5. So warriors with armor 5/5 are super tough. I said it before, but having these armor changes really changes the dynamic that these guys can, or the way your game is going to play out, because these guys can be a lot more aggressive with their placement than you would expect them to be, being on horses and being able to be shot and stuff, because they have armor 5/5, and so your opponent will usually waste their activations because they won't get as much value as they need, while you still can get a lot of value out of your activations. So if an enemy unit activates for a shooting attack, they need to target the Lancers if even one model can, and that is insane protection, because you can put your Lancers, you can move them around in a way where your opponent, and it doesn't really matter what kind of shooting attack it is, if it's from pikes, or if it's from just straight up crossbows, or javelins, or bows, these guys, because they have to be the ones being shot, if even one model can, they can, one, take out or kind of force your opponent to do bad shots, because maybe, yes, they're positioned in a way where they can shoot a juicy Hearthguard unit of yours with the full 12 levies with crossbows, and that's 6 shots and it's going to hurt a lot, but your Lombard Lancers, one of them is within large of one of the crossbows, and so they have to shoot your Lombard Lancers with that shot, and that's just going to be 1 shot instead of 6, and that's so good, because they keep your units safe and they're tough. They want to be shot and they're tough, and they keep your guys safe. So I think them not having a debuff to their melee or something just makes them super good, and they're here at a very good merc list because they do everything you want your mercenaries to do. They don't need any more activations or crazy dice investments. You just activate them once, you put them where they need to be, possibly charge them in where they need to be, because they can get a large, because they're unbounded horses and they can only move medium. And then once they're there, you just let them be there and let your opponent have to just shoot at them, and that's great value. Next up are the mounted crossbowmen. So that's 8 warriors mounted on horses with crossbows, and they can shoot with a range of large. So even though they're kind of feel like they're composite bow warriors, they're not. They can shoot large, and they can activate for a free move after shooting, so that's the skirmisher rule again. And they provide 2 bonus attack dice for friendly units within short. So when they charge themselves, they count themselves, so that's going to be 10 attack dice just for their own charge, and for every other charge within short, they're going to give out 2 free attack dice and buff up everything around them, while still being able to shoot at a range of large, and then running away for a range of large, and then getting a fatigue after that, of course. But since it's so easy, you activate them to shoot, you get value from the shot, and then they can run where they need to give buffs, and that makes it super easy to keep these guys in range of short of your units to give out the bonus attack dice. And then they can still play a very different role, where you just move up your foot army and you have a line, and behind that your crossbowmen are waiting, and whenever you are charged, the bonus attack dice will get that melee slightly in your favor, which is great. So these kind of provide a free Saga ability every melee that they're part of, or that a friendly unit within short is part of. And then the champion of the mercenaries in Age of Chivalry is definitely the cannon. It's a single figure that replaces 6 levies or 4 warriors, and they have a special shot that replaces normal shooting, so no shooting reaction is possible, so your opponent literally cannot interact with what they're doing. And they don't do normal shot, they roll a 2d6, and they get a +1 bonus to their result when shooting at least 6 figures in a unit. And so the results 3 to 5 have no effect, and doubles means that the cannon takes 1 fatigue, which is completely irrelevant. So yes, doubles kind of hurt, and then if you have double 6s, that would usually be a great result, but that's just that the cannon takes a fatigue. So that's the bad effects that can happen. So that's 3 to 5 and doubles. And then the other ones are great. So on 6 to 8, the opponent's unit gets 1 fatigue, and on 9 to 10, 1 fatigue and a casualty. On an 11, that's 1 fatigue and 2 casualties, and on a 12, that's 1 fatigue and 3 casualties. So if you're shooting a small unit, which you kind of should try to avoid, it's not that hard, you're going to have a 14 out of 36 chance to have a bad result, so that's either no effect or doubles. And then if you shoot a big unit, that's only 10 out of 36, that's a bad result, and everything else, so 26 out of 36 is at least a fatigue. And that fatigue is what really matters, because just reliably putting a fatigue on an opponent's unit is really good, and sometimes sniping a figure is just the cherry on top. And what makes this so great is that your opponent can't do shooting reactions. So the cannon is super good, and basically every army kind of wants one, some more than others. This is basically half a point, and it doesn't generate a Saga die, so maybe not for every army, but for many armies. So that was the Age of Chivalry Mercenary tier list overview. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you kind of learned something about the mercenaries and can now better decide which one you want to bring for your own army. Feel free to leave a comment and a like and let us know how we're doing. And thank you so much for watching. Bye bye.